So what I want to focus on right now is on the integrity of the accounting profession. Is the integrity of the accounting profession under threat or not? And whenever we think of accounting in South Africa, I suppose these days, we think immediately of some of the scandals that have prevailed in the space. But we're going to focus specifically on external auditors and those who conduct audits on companies, who assess the status of their health, who give assessments. And you recall the story that I shared with you this morning, which is in the Business Day. It's on their front page around VBS, for example, having their 2017 audited statements withdrawn. And the curator of the Vendor Building Society Mutual Bank, this is Anush Ruplal, announced earlier the withdrawal of their 2017 audited financial statements because he says they contain material misstatements and are no longer considered to be reliable. And then we also think of organizations like and the KPMG, that auditing firm, which took a great deal of flack as well and had their credibility put under the spotlight. So where does it leave the accounting profession altogether? We have the Big Four monopoly, that's what it's known as in South Africa, KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, Arthur Andersen. We had 2 officials from KPMG resign. Just this weekend, 2 more partners who were facing disciplinary charges related to work done for the very VBS Mutual Bank that I've talked about now also announced their resignation. So the integrity of the accounting profession is under threat, and I would love your thoughts on whether you agree with this, whether you trust and have faith in these big accounting firms. So I've got a couple of people that are going to share their thoughts with us. One is Faith Ngwenya, who is a technical and standard executive at SAIPA, and SAIPA is the South African Institute for Professional Accountants. We try to get the Independent Regulatory Board for Auditors, the IRBA. They weren't available to join us, but Mbusiswa Ngobo is the president of ABASA, and this is the Association for the Advancement of Black Accountants in Southern Africa. Those are my guests so far. We'll bring in some more voices as we go along. So to the both of you, thank you very much for your time this morning. Appreciate it. Faith, maybe let's just start with you. You're at the South African Institute of Professional Accountants. How badly damaged do you think the accounting profession's reputation in South Africa right now has been?
I don't think it has been extremely damaged. We obviously are working very hard to ensure that we do restore the confidence of the people. And I think the steps that, for example, the IRBA has taken in the light of all the events that have come out, has kind of given assurance that all is not that bad.
But you talk about some kind of rehabilitation that needs to happen. In what ways has it been damaged, even if it's not been damaged to the extent that you say some people might think it has been?
I think by obviously being very decisive in dealing with the issues, not ignoring what has happened. For example, if you take the KPMG issue, which was more or less the first issue that came to light, the fact that the profession said, this is what's happening, and we will go and investigate. SAICA has actually set up an investigative commission that's looking into that. So in a way, that's obviously saying, we will not just turn a blind eye when we see that things are not going right. And we will do something to remedy the situation, or to investigate, and where required to remedy and call to book the people that obviously need to be called to book.
And Mbusiswa, your thoughts? Welcome.
Thanks, Iman, and greeting to your listeners, Power FM listeners. My perspective is that this is merely just a tip of the iceberg in terms of audit quality. Why am I saying that? If you look at the structure of the accounting firms, and there's also an interesting thing that the public knows that as accounting firms. But I think the distinction between an accounting firm and an audit firm needs to be in place, as the practitioners who are playing in the industry can pretty much articulate those differences. But however, because of the integrated service lines that are built into these firms, so you've got firms, let's take the Big Four, in this instance, they will provide an external audit. They will also provide tax advisory services. They will provide consulting services. So the business motives are prevalent within the entire service line. So what then, impacts auditor quality is the ability to distinction and to distinctly separate these interests, these business interests, including, the auditing businesses. So I genuinely think it's a tip of the iceberg, and it's also informed by some of, my earlier days when I was training as a chartered accountant. I'm obviously not a practicing auditor, but when I trained through the auditing space, which is called the auditing outside the public practice. And some of my experiences, when I look back at some of the things that were going on, and now a much more mature person who can reflect clinically on these things, definitely we've got a serious issue with audit quality in South Africa, and it is not just a South African phenomenon. I think the development of the accounting profession globally and its ability to distinctly separate these obviously areas that have potential to have some negative outcomes when it comes to public interest. That is, consulting services, versus auditing services, because of the public interest around the practice of audits.
The thing is, Faith and Mbusiswa, when we've looked at these companies, and I'm glad you made the distinction, Mbusiswa, between accounting firms and auditing firms. I think there's some definitions we can go into with regard to how their work is differentiated. But you kind of place chartered accountants, we do kind of on a certain type of pedestal, that they would be above reproach, they would have the company and the shareholder interests top of mind, that everything can be accounted for in the work that they do. But through the scandals around McKinsey, SAP, and KPMG, that image has been severely dented. You said it was at the tip of the iceberg. And in fact, I'm going to bring in Dion Mlaba, who wrote, and Dion is the chief financial officer of RH Bophelo, and you know that they are a healthcare investment vehicle here in South Africa. They're fresh on the JSE. Dion, you wrote an open letter to the head of, this is to Dr. Nombembe, the CEO of SAICA, and you heard, I don't know if you heard Faith earlier say that the commission is now looking into that. There will be some action taken, but it kind of left, this whole saga left quite a bitter taste in your mouth, didn't it?
No, definitely it did. I mean, we headed for disaster as a country if no one can rely into corporate South Africa. I mean, the same thing that happened into our SOEs is what now is going to happen in the private sector. Think about an ordinary investor wants to put money into a company, but you can't trust the management of that company. And I think the CA profession in the country is very important, and it's seen as a safeguard, or as individuals that will be willing to uphold in terms of the integrity of those financials or anything that comes out of those businesses. So today we are sitting with all this, the auditing firms that are largely employed CAs. You are sitting with CFOs of all these listed companies or even non-listed companies, where you don't know in terms of the whether you can rely on this financial. Looking at the sign-off issue led by the most CAs, audited by most CAs, and you ask yourself, really, can I start now trusting anything that comes out from corporate South Africa? Because you have auditors that have been put in place in order to safeguard and make sure the integrity of everything that comes out from these companies that are well checked and that they are accurate. So this goes back again in terms of international investors. So international investors, before, when they come into South Africa, obviously they look at which vehicle does have all the proper governance that you can trust in terms of putting your money into it. But now, given all this corruption that's happening in South Africa, all these auditing firms, which now is starting to be similar to that of the SOEs, where no one wanted to touch the SOEs for that particular reason. So I think, in my point of view, we have seen this. I mean, we have done a lot of fundraising, trying to get investors. The question is always the governance of the board, the independence of the auditing firms. And I think whatever is done in terms of this, the rotation of auditors, that one definitely will bring that independence back. We're going to break away from this auditor-client 20, 50-year relationship, because once you sit with that type of a relationship, it's difficult for you to have that objective view over the client. So while if you force the audit rotation, so you allow other auditors to come in. And I think maybe one last point from my side is, if you look at how government currently operates, is that the Auditor General is the one that goes and audits all the municipalities and all the government entities. They're the one that outsource those services to all the different auditors across the country. So now currently, if you look at corporate South Africa, they're the one that go and choose a particular auditing firm to audit them. So you can based on those negotiations, it's much easier for the auditors to lose their independence towards that particular client. While in government, the way it's done is that position is different, because it encourages the integrity and the independence, because the Auditor General will go and choose a KPMG or a PwC to go and audit a particular municipality. So meaning that the relationship is not of a client and an auditor, but the auditor really is there to do their job.
Although it hasn't served them. I mean, it hasn't inoculated them from potential wrongdoing, as we saw recently with regard to KPMG, and the scathing assertions that Parliament made about some of the work that it's done, work that they might have to go and take another look at. But what you also say in your article, Dion, in your letter to Terence Nombembe, is there need to be reforms. And Faith, this is what I want to ask you about, and Mbusisa as well, around if we have created a climate which allows this kind of malfeasance to happen, or a lack of integrity to kind of take root. Mbusiswa said it was just the tip of the iceberg. What reforms then are needed to make sure that we can inoculate or vaccinate ourselves from this ever happening again? Faith?
I think what we really need to do, Mbusiswa has touched on, which is the importance of independence as far as the accountancy profession is concerned, that there obviously is separation of consulting services from the auditing services. And I also just want to touch on the fact that we need to bear in mind that the accountancy profession in most cases is coming as independent of the organization. So the problem in a number of the cases that we have seen coming out to light is with the leadership of the businesses. And in terms of the way that they are running the business, and I fully agree that obviously by you going to choose an auditor that is going to come and audit your organization, you will likely go for somebody or stick with somebody that is lenient to your wrongdoing or not necessarily exposing what needs to be exposed. And if we obviously are going into to curb this going forward, we will need to separate the consulting. We will need to ensure that there is clear. I mean, we in our training, we obviously have to be aware of the threats that we have as professionals. So what are the threats? And I think that needs to be re-emphasized, that if there is any threat in the relationship that you have with your client, just distance yourself. And I think the audit firm rotation, which again, I mean, a lot of auditors and auditing firms are opposed to, is going to be the solution, because the risk of familiarity really is what has led to what we have seen with KPMG and the companies that they have been dealing with. So if we can actually get to a stage where we know that in the next 3-5 years, a new person is going to be auditing us, and they are going to uncover whatever wrongdoing which might have been overlooked by the previous auditors, it's actually going to come to light. So it has to be, it needs to be a partnership, obviously, between the leaders of businesses and the profession.
But here's the thing, Mbusiswa, you know, there's that old song that goes, hindsight is 20/20 vision. So we've had enough of hindsight. The public seems to believe collectively, and this is just tapping into what I hear from people on the line every day, and just my own observation of how much time SAICA is taking to round all of this off, and for us to really see what I always say is my favorite image of men in suits or whoever they may be in suits being thrown into the back of police vehicles, because this VBS 2017 audited statements that have been withdrawn. PwC was the internal auditor, KPMG the external auditor around their 2017 financial statements. You see the same companies' names being brought up in a swirl of scandal. So are we really learning enough?
I think the lessons are there, Iman. I think that what is a challenge is the sector's, receptiveness to accepting the reforms that need to take place. And also, from a regulatory point of view, if we look at some of the amendments that one could potentially propose to address some of these problems, the IRBA is the accreditor of registered auditors, and perhaps a reform to look at making sure that when the auditors are, in practice, that register of interest, of the auditors is then recorded at an IRBA level. So there is potential and scope to make sure that, at a legislative, at a legislative process, these concerns are addressed. But, as, to the size of the industry, it is going to take some time, but it needs bold leadership. What I also just wanted to touch on, when we look at auditor quality, and it's quite a strange phenomenon to observe as a South African who's been part of the profession, or is part of the profession through my organization, is that the Auditor General, the public sector, they get so much flack for all the corruption that is being unearthed within the public sector. However, no one really goes back to compare even the type of audit quality that is delivered by the Auditor General versus, the Big Four in the space you're talking to. So my colleague was touching on that, in terms of the AG's audit and them actually appointing the Big Four. And what the head of audits has discovered from the Auditor General is that they end up spending so much more time from the audits that they've taken back from the firms. And I think it's the issue of fee recoveries and the profit motives that need to be guarded against. So, I'm merely making the point that given that, the glaring, moral stances between private sector and public sector is actually in reality is also something that's a bit of a myth, based on what we've seen. And I would really be saying, these firms also need to look at themselves, with a very, very.
I don't know. You can go ahead and ask and make that call, Mbusiswa, for them to look at themselves. I would.